All right, in this math lesson, we're going to be looking at solving multi-step equations that involve negative numbers of all sorts, fractions, whole numbers, decimals, but the real focus is going to be including a step that involves the distributive property, which hopefully sounds like something familiar. Just as a quick intro or reminder, distributive property is when, let's say you've got 3c minus 3 times 6 minus 2c. All right, we've got a little expression here, and I noticed there's a way to simplify this, and that's by taking this part of the expression, and I've got 3 times 6 minus 2c. So I'm going to distribute. Distribute means I'm going to multiply the number on the outside of the parentheses, the 3 times everything on the inside of the parentheses. So 3 times 6 and 3 times 2c, because that's what this portion of the expression is saying. This is saying 3 is being multiplied by this whole set of things inside the parentheses. So 3 times 6, 18, and then 3 times 2 is 6c. So you could get rid of the parentheses or simplify that part of the expression by distributing, by taking that 3 and multiplying it to everything inside of the parentheses. So we're going to look at equations that have a little touch of distributive property in them. So here's our first example. We got negative 4 and times 9 minus 3x equals 48. So typically when you solve an equation, you use inverse operations. You go backwards through the normal order of operations. But in this scenario, I can simplify the left side of the equation slightly. I can distribute. That will get rid of the parentheses, and then I can go backwards through my order of operations. So the first thing I'm going to do is negative 4 times 9 and negative 4 times 3. So negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. And then negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. But that's going to make this minus negative 12x. And minus a negative, remember when we subtract, we'll change it to add the opposite. So let's do that right off the bat. Plus 12x. You could have written minus negative 12, but ultimately, when we have subtraction and negatives are involved, it's good to change the subtraction to addition by doing add the opposite. And now we're going to finish solving the equation using inverse operations. So the first thing I'm going to do, remember I want to get rid of all the things that are on the side of the equation that has the variable, everything that's around the x. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this, the negative 36. So how do I get rid of negative 36? I add 36. Negative 36 plus 36 is 0. Inverse cancels out. And whatever you do to one side of the equation, you do to the other side. So now I've got the leftover part on the left side of the equation is 12x. And on the right-hand side of the equation, I've got 84. And now this is an easy finish. 12 times x, divide by 12. That's the inverse of multiply, and divide by 12. So x is going to be equal to 7, positive 7. And that's the solution to this equation. Our first step was to simplify a bit using using the distributive property. Then we used inverse operations, and we got down to the bottom. X equals positive 7. All right, our next example, 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 1 is equal to 33. So before I do anything else, since I have 2 times some stuff in parentheses, that's a prime candidate for using distributive property. So 2 times 2x and 2 times 1. And then I'm going to rewrite my problem and go from there. So 3x plus 4x, 2 times 2 is 4x, minus 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, Another thing I could do on the left-hand side of the equation is I could combine these like terms. 3x plus 4x is 7x. Might as well. So I've taken this big bad equation on the top line, and I've simplified it down to 7x minus 2 equals 33. That's super manageable. We can definitely do that. The first thing is I'm going to get rid of any addition or subtraction. There is subtraction, so the inverse is to add 2 to both sides. That's going to leave 7x is equal to 35. And then my last step, 7 times x, I'm going to divide by 7. That's the inverse. And divide by 7, and I'll get x equals 5. So final solution to this equation is x is equal to positive 5. And there are the steps to go through. All right, I figured we'd do one more, but this one has fractions and distributive property, which isn't a problem. It's just a little bit of extra work. Since it's 3/4 times x plus 5.5, I'm going to be distributing 3/4 to everything in the parentheses. So 3/4 times x is 3/4 x, and 3/4 times 5.5. So 3/4, I'll do this on the side. You cannot multiply when you have mixed numbers. You need to make this an improper fraction. So 3/4 times 11 over 2. And then I can get that to 33 over 8. So 3/4 x plus 33/8 is equal to 5/8. All right, so I've simplified as my first step by using the distributive property, and now I am going to go through inverse operations to get down to the bottom of what x is equal to. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 33 over 8 from both sides, minus 33/8. That leaves 3/4 x on the left-hand side of the equation, and on the right-hand side, I know it's going to be eighths because the denominator stays the same when you add or subtract fractions. And then on the numerator, 5 minus 33 is going to be negative, so put a negative sign, 28. All right, and as my last step here, I am going to 3/4 times x. I need to divide by 3/4, or dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, so that's going to cancel out. Do the same thing to this side. Divide by 3/4, or ultimately when you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal, so times 4/3. And that gets me to x is equal to, I know my solution is going to be negative because I have a negative times a positive. And all right, here we go. I'm going to cross simplify here. And I'm going to get 28/6, and I'm going to make that into a mixed number because that's a little bit nicer to have as a final answer. 6 can go into 28 4 times, and I've got 4 left over. So -4 and 2/3 is my best possible final answer. And that is solving equations that have multiple steps and that you can first use the distributive property as a means of simplifying. If you have questions, as always, reach out. Otherwise, good luck with your work today. Take your time, show all the steps, use these problems as a model. They should be helpful in your work. Bye-bye.